plan A is drug them, turn them into animals. But if that doesn't work, plan B is get them naked and castrate them.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to Winnow, a couple close reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married, and we love to talk about books together.
In this podcast, we are working our way book by book through the entirety of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. This particular episode will cover the Odyssey, Book 10.
Indeed. Cannibalism and turning men into animals.
Yes. Good stuff, good stuff. So, I'm going to start with a 60-second speed summary, and then Bella will ask the opening question.
I like when you do the summary. I feel like 1,000 times more relaxed about the opening of the episode. 3, 2, 1.
Odysseus and his crew land on the island of Aeolus, who's the wind god. He gives them a gift, and they are sailing home. They get very close to shore, to their home, and Odysseus falls asleep, and his men are like, hey, what's in this little bag that he was given? They open it, and it's a bunch of wind that blows them way back off course. Odysseus shows back up to Aeolus, and is like, hey, can you, help us out? And he's like, no, you squandered my gift. Get out of here. So they're sailing on their own now. They land on another island where the Laestrygonian giants are. The Laestrygonian giants kill a bunch of their men, very many. Odysseus is down to one ship, and so this one ship is now sailing off with a bunch of people dead, and they land on Circe's island. So they split up because they're a little bit more wary of strangers now. The first group goes to this palace, and Circe turns them into pigs. Odysseus then figures out how to get around this with the help of Hermes and an antidote, and then they stay for a while as humans, and they party, and then Circe is like, hey, you got to go to the Underworld. Bye.
That was close there.
Yeah, I probably spent too much time on the first part and not enough on the second half, but I feel like in our podcast, we'll talk more about the second half than the first half anyway.
Well,
so
it's interesting because it's similar to when I gave the 60-second summary last episode, I felt a similar feeling where, so in the last book, the main event is the Cyclops. And in this book, the main event is Circe's island.
And there's two little episodes that happen first. Both of them are kind of 3 parts, but it's the third one is the vast majority of the actual runtime. Yeah,
and in both books, the last one and this one, there's these there's these 2 little preambles before the main event. And it's an interesting structure, and it's interesting that it repeats. Mm-hmm. So, my opening question. Mm-hmm. I won't start jumping straight to Circe. There is something I want to talk about that comes a little bit before that. And so I shall read this section. So this takes place when they arrive on Circe's island. Odysseus says, I decided to go back down first to the beach and ship and feed my men, and then set out to scout. When I had almost reached my ship, some god took pity on me in my loneliness and sent a mighty stag with great tall antlers to cross my path. He ran down from the forest to drink out of the river. It was hot. I struck him in the middle of his back. My bronze spear pierced him. With a moan, he fell onto the dust. His spirit flew away. I stepped on him and tugged my bronze spear out and left it on the ground. He goes on to describe how he just randomly knows how to weave a rope out of twigs and then ties the animal together. Mm-hmm. And he lugs the huge stag back to camp. So my question is, what's going on with this scene where Odysseus kills this stag?
Yeah. No, I think it does stand out to me as well. Again, if we're comparing this to the Cyclops as the kind of big event of the last one, right? When they got to the Cyclops' island, the first thing they did was they shot a bunch of goats and they had a party, and then they went. And here it's not a group thing. It's just Odysseus, and it's only one stag instead of a bunch. But there is this this similar pattern happening of hunting animals before then sort of encountering the main part of the adventure. So yeah, it is pretty striking. And obviously I think we have to consider it with the rest of what we know, the hindsight that we as readers get, because we know that Circe's magic power is turning humans into animals.
Yeah.
And so I think the obvious kind of like conspiracy theory is like, is this stag previously a human who was turned by Circe?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, because it's whenever they get to these islands, they sort of read like the beginnings of horror stories.
Yeah.
Where they don't know yet what they're encountering, and so until later, and sort of, and there's this creepy feeling of like they don't really know what's going on, I guess. And in this specific example, right, like they don't know. They're not. We know it's Circe's Island because Odysseus narrating the story tells us it's Circe's Island because he knows it in retrospect. But they could potentially not know where they are at all.
In the moment, yeah.
In the moment. And they are just killing the stag. It's later. They have not yet sent off men to go talk to Circe.
Because, at this point, Odysseus has just like climbed up a hill and has like seen smoke from a fireplace, and his like, I think it's funny, his gut reaction is like, I'm gonna go, and he's like, oh, I should probably go like get my crew and we should talk about this all together. Yeah. And it's like as he's on his way down the hill that he comes across this, right? So it's very early on. It's before really they know that there's some civilization on the island because there's a fireplace. But that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, we both, because of Odysseus's narration and because we're sitting here having read all of book 10, we know what Circe does. Yeah.
Which is she turns people, as we discover, she turns men into animals.
Yeah.
It's not just, we always think about the pigs. And if we have read Sea of Monsters, we think about guinea pigs, right?
Yeah.
But it's mentioned that like it could be a variety of animals, wolves or lions. When they approach Circe's palace for the first time, like wolves and lions are kind of like circling the property, like protecting it. So it's not just like pigs or boars. So yeah, I think it kind of leaves open this possibility that the stag that they shoot, this giant stag that they shoot when they arrive on the island, is a people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that, so I read the passage because I think it's super interesting. The way that the creature, the stag, is described when it's killed, with a moan, he fell onto the dust, his spirit flew away. And that kind of language is really only reserved for the deaths of when the deaths of people are described, like in the Iliad, right? The spirit flying away and all this stuff.
Right. So if we just accept this theory that this stag is a person who has been transformed by Circe, I think that illuminates both things that have happened previously and things that happen later. So which direction do you want to start with?
Well, I think so. This passage comes right off the back of their interaction with the Laestrygonians. Right. Right. The Laestrygonians, who famously are giants who do cannibalism with Odysseus's men, or upon Odysseus's men. Yeah. So I don't know. It feels so intentional. There's not even like a paragraph break between the Laestrygonian story and them washing up on Circe's Island eating the stag. And it just kind of draws this parallel for me of things in the story tend to be like passed back and forth in this interesting way. And so like you have the Laestrygonians eating Odysseus's men, and then potentially Odysseus's men turn right around and they eat a human being that they don't recognize as a human being, potentially. Yeah. And I just find like it's almost like these moments of like hypocritical actions that jump back and forth, because like throughout Odysseus's tale we can see from one perspective we're like, oh yeah, the Laestrygonians are terrible, and then we turn right around and we're like, whoa, Odysseus's men are being terrible. Like it kind of always, it jumps around.
Yeah, and I think all of this too is sort of, if we think about the narrative as all of these sort of episodes sort of flow into one another, we have to think about the kind of like collective, I guess trauma is the best word, that has been happening to the crew of like sort of slowly losing more and more men, where in book 9, they lost some men, like with the Kaikons, they lost, I think it was like half a dozen from every ship, and then they moved on. And then with the Lotus Eaters, they didn't lose any. They almost did, but they like figured out how to get them back home. And then with Polyphemus, They don't lose that many. I think Polyphemus eats 4 or 6 people, it says.
Yeah, it's like less than 10.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
But it's much more sort of up close and visceral, and like the danger feels, I think, more real than just sort of, or maybe not more real, but more extreme than simply like battles or like losing men in battle. And then the other moment that is a really interesting in between all of these sort of like losing men is also losing home. I think the encounter with Aeolus, and that often gets brushed over because it's kind of like in between these pretty big and dramatic moments. But when I actually think about it, I actually think that probably had the biggest impact on them of any of these, to be able, because again, I think that it's even clear that like they could see fire, like campfires and things like that on the shores of Ithaca. Like they were that's that how close they get. And then they open the bag of wind and just get transported way back.
It feels like the interaction with the Cyclops was the beginning of Odysseus's men being like, I don't know, this guy is sometimes he's a little bit hard to trust that like he has our best interests at heart.
Yeah.
It's kind of that. And so when they get so close to Ithaca that they can see the fires, someone, I forget who, but some of his men, they are suspicious that the bag that contains the winds that Aeolus gave Odysseus, a bag that contained powerful winds.
But also didn't tell Odysseus this. That's also important. Odysseus doesn't know what's in it either.
Oh, he just Aeolus like secures it to the front of his ship. And he made a zephyr blow so that the breath could carry home their ships. So there's just air in the bag. There's literal air in the bag.
Yeah.
And Odysseus's men one night. So this comes down to like, I think you've been keeping track of whose fault things are.
Yeah.
And this one is a tricky one because Odysseus falls, he's so intent on getting home and being the one at the helm of the ship that he hasn't slept in days. But he accidentally dozes off. His men are getting suspicious that the bag that he was given by Aeolus is actually full of gold coins.
And that like he's not divvying up fairly with all of them because I think, ostensibly whenever they get loot, they sort of divide it up. I'm sure it's not equal parts to everybody, but like everybody kind of gets a little bit. And so they're like, wait, did he just get a bunch of gold that he's not like telling us about and putting it into the sort of communal coffers? Yeah.
I love the line one of his men says, "It seems that everybody loves this man and honors him in every place we sail to."
Yeah.
That's just really funny to me. But yeah, so it's that suspicion that the bag that's full of literal air has unshared gold in it. That's why they open it. And it pushes them 100% in the opposite direction. They go all the way back to Aeolus's island.
Well, in my scorekeeping, I actually didn't know how to score this because you can make an argument that it's Odysseus' fault, both for falling asleep and for kind of not telling his men what was in the bag. But then you could also argue that it was Aeolus' fault for not really telling Odysseus the dangers of opening the bag. Like there wasn't a clear, like, do not open this bag warning that was given. Or you could make the argument that it was the crew's fault for not trusting Odysseus and opening the bag. I think, this one is a little bit of everybody's fault.
Regardless.
Right.
They go way off track.
The trauma of like being that close. Like, again, it's important to keep in mind in the story of the Odyssey, this is, like maybe a month after they left the shores of Troy, but they were at Troy for 10 years. So for all of these men, it's been 10 years since they've been home with their families.
Yeah.
And so for all of them to be that close and then get blown away, would have been utterly tragic. And then to land on the Laestrygonian Islands and then have 11 of your 12 ships destroyed. And so like at this point, like I don't know how many men are on a ship, but
a lot.
Basically probably. To go from a couple hundred guys to like, I think like 40 maybe.
I don't know.
Is again, they're just going through these constant losses.
I sometimes find it confusing why the Cyclops in the previous book gets so much screen time. But the Laestrygonians, who also eat his men, who are also giant, who also throw rocks at their ships.
And eat way more, and they're way more destructive than the Cyclops was.
Yeah. But yet the Cyclops gets tons more screen time than these Laestrygonians do. When it feels like it's a repeat but bigger in a sense, and they lose so much more in this interaction. And so it's interesting why Odysseus he's sort of fast forwarding through these events.
Yeah, but I do think thinking about this helps recontextualize the stag at Circe's island, because at that moment, right, I think Odysseus's inclination when he sees the chimney and the smoke is to just like keep going, rushing into it. But he does seem to have learned at least a little bit that he should pay attention to his crew. And I do genuinely read his like killing of the stag as an attempt at an act of kindness and maybe like reconciliation with his crew, to be like, hey, like, I brought you this, like I hunted this big stag on my own. I carried it all the way by myself.
Yeah.
And yet, right, like while the intent was to be kind and generous, it actually, the impact might be inadvertently like making your crew into quasi cannibals.
Yeah.
But I think, so here's a question for you. We're using cannibalism pretty loosely here.
Yeah.
Is it cannibalism if you eat an animal that was once a human?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's interesting. Like,
and you don't, especially that you don't know it. Yeah.
Yeah. All of the act of cannibalism that we've been talking about, that we've been labeling as cannibalism, is all kind of quasi cannibalism, because, right, the Cyclopses are not purely, they're not all the way people.
Human beings. Yeah.
One-to-one exact human beings. And then again, the Laestrygonians, human beings, but giants. They're also quasi-human.
Yeah.
And then we get into the nature. We can then talk about like the nature of these transformations.
Yes.
That's Circe is able to transform these men into animals. And what exactly is she doing? Because she is able to change their appearance, but to what extent is she changing like the inner self?
Yeah.
Right.
So do you want to skip ahead to when Odysseus's crew goes and encounters Circe? Again, I think as another sign of maybe growth, like they're very clear, like we should split up, only send half the crew at a time in case something goes wrong. And Eurylochus is a part of the first group to go, and even he is even more wary when all the crew is talking to Circe. He even hangs back, and that's what he is not transformed. And so he's able to go back to Odysseus and the rest of the crew on the shore. But let's read the transformation.
She led them in, sat them on chairs, and blended them a potion of barley, cheese, and golden honey mixed with Praemian wine. She added potent drugs to make them totally forget their home. They took and drank the mixture. Then she struck them using her magic wand and penned them in the pigsty. They were turned to pigs in body and voice and hair. Their minds remained the same. They squealed at their imprisonment, and Circe threw them some mast and cornel cherries, food that pigs liked rooting for in muddy ground.
I got to read Pope's on this because it's really good.
Yeah.
Soon in the luscious feast themselves they lost and drank oblivion of their native coast. Instant her circling wand the goddess waves, to hogs transforms them, and the sty receives. No more was seen the human form divine, head, face, and members bristle into swine. Still cursed with sense, their minds remain alone, and their own voice affrights them when they groan.
Nice. So the part that we are particularly interested in is they were turned to pigs in body and voice and hair. Their minds remained the same.
Ostensibly, these people can see and think and retain all of their memories and human faculties. They just can't express them, right? Like when they speak, they squeak. So they can't make any sign that they are human, but they still have the human sort of mental faculties, which then again gives another layer to the potential stag killing, where theoretically this stag like was fully conscious of what was happening. I think like when we generally think about hunting, we generally understand animals to have less awareness than humans, and that is part of why we eat them, or we don't, feel as bad about eating them as we do about eating humans. But in this case, right, like this stag, while having the body of a stag, had the mind of a man, if indeed this theory is true, and thus was like fully aware of being killed / murdered by Odysseus.
The thing that I find like strange about this transformation is all of this text, all of this like the Homeric texts, like took place before the idea of like the Cartesian mind-body split. And so I find it quite strange to have an idea like this, that like a body could change, but a mind or thinking would remain the same, to be this indication of like an acknowledgement of like a mind-body divide.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just find it to feel like a very modern idea of transformation.
I mean, because it's very kind of like kids movie of like talking animals, right? Like I feel like our culture is so comfortable with talking animals through tons and tons of animated movies and TV shows and Dr. Dolittle and all this. The idea that like an animal could theoretically have every same thing that a human has, just a different body, is like very normal to us.
Yeah,
but back then, I do agree, it feels like it would have been very foreign.
Yeah, because form and function, form and being, like these things were hand in hand with one another.
Yeah.
In ancient thinking. It also kind of means that when they transform, like it's more horrible this way, because when these guys transform into pigs, they don't think pig thoughts. They're not like happy to be a pig and happy to have like things in the mud. Like they are trapped within an animal body.
Right.
Like it has a more of a body horror aspect.
Yeah, which is then even, I think, further exacerbated by Circe then throwing them food that pigs like. Where like if they theoretically still have human minds, like they're like, I don't want to eat acorns off the ground. Like that's not what I desire and I enjoy. And so the fact that like their bodies desire, like acorn and pig things, but their mind, still wants wine and cheese and bread and all these kinds of things. But I think there's another interesting echo with this kind of language or ideas of sort of disjointedness that comes at the very end. So we're going to skip over a lot that we'll get back to, but at the very, very end of book 10, there's a very strange scene, like the stag, where it's like, what is this doing here? Where there's one of Odysseus's crew, as they're like spending their last night on the island, he gets drunk and he goes to sleep up on the roof because it's cool. And then when he wakes up, he forgets that he's on the roof and he falls off and dies. And the description of this young man, Elpenor is his name, R.I.P. Elpenor, is very interesting. I'm going to read from Pope's translation, because again, there's some very good language and just turns of phrases in here, and then we'll talk about some of the Greek. So, a youth there was, Elpenor was he named, not much for sense, nor much for courage famed, the youngest of our band, a vulgar soul, born to banquet and to drain the bowl. He, hot and careless, on a turret's height, with sleep repaired the long debauch of night. The sudden tumult stirred him where he lay, and down he hastened, but forgot the way. Full headlong from the roof the sleeper fell, and snapped the spinal joint, and waked in hell.
That is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it's great. But the phrase that made me look it up, the description of him as a vulgar soul, I was curious. I figured that Pope was doing a little bit of liberties. Do you have what Wilson translates?
So the youngest one, Elpenor was his name. Not very brave in war, nor very smart, was lying high up in the home of Circe. Yeah,
so it's this idea that smart, not very smart. Lattimore does it. Not terribly powerful in fighting, nor sound in his thoughts. Mm-hmm. In the Greek, there are two interesting components. So the first is the thoughts part, phresin, which is related to words that we'll talk about in just a sec. And then aureros, which is the participial form of the verb aurarisco, which means to join or to fit together. And so when you look at sort of all the ways that this word is used sort of in all, not just in Homer, it's actually more like a carpentry or kind of mechanical to like join together, or like shields are described as like joined together, you know, in a formation or things like that. So it's a very mechanistic, like joining together of something. And so if Elpenor's thoughts are not joined together, that's sort of the language that is used to describe his being not smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it very interesting, this idea of things being sort of out of joint, because as we were talking about with the transformation, there seems to be this, again, disjointedness between mind and body, where the body is now pig, but the mind is still human. And so there's all of these, I think, parallels, of being two things at the same time, or not properly connected in some ways. And so I think the other important thing, just to briefly note, here in the description of Elpenor, the word that's used is fren, and then in the original transformation of the men into pigs, it says their mind, that is translated as nous. And we are not prepared right now with either the time or the knowledge to fully explain all of the nuances between different words for sort of like mind and thoughts and soul, both in Homer and then as they kind of, you know, change through history, because there's a lot of ways and kind of they get used in similar and confusing ways, and they shift a lot through history.
Yeah, but fren and nous both generally mean mind.
Yeah, in that sort of realm of things.
Yes.
Yeah. Even I was just reading some, I think, 14th century theologian, and in the introduction that was written by modern scholars, they were kind of explaining how when you read these parts, you have to keep in mind that like at the time they understood the mind to be like located in the heart, because fren, I'm pretty sure, began as an anatomical term for like the midriff. But that was where they didn't understand the brain to be where the mind lived, but it was actually more in the heart. And so, yeah, like even, you know, millennia later after this, there's still these sort of shifting ideas of where is the mind and the soul and the thoughts and all of these kinds of things. Yeah.
Maybe it's a good time to transition to talking about Circe herself, maybe, and what she maybe, I don't have a great answer for this, but what she maybe represents to Odysseus along his journey. And because obviously she's a puzzle to solve. Every other man who walks up to this house gets given the potion, tapped by the wand, and turned into an animal. But Odysseus does not. So we can get into the details of why. Mostly it has to do with Hermes being nice to him and giving him the moly antidote. Yeah.
That's worth talking about, right?
Yeah,
because there's a moment where, right, Eurylochus didn't get transformed. He comes back and sort of like tells Odysseus and the rest of the crew what happened, and everybody's like, oh no, like this is awful. And Eurylochus is like, we should just leave, cut our losses, get out of here. Like, we can't face that. And Odysseus is like, you coward. Like, if you don't want to come with us, you stay here by the ships, but we're going to get our men. Yeah. But like, the whole time I'm reading this, I'm thinking, like, what is Odysseus's plan? He kind of gets bailed out by Hermes because he just seems like he's planning on charging in there with his sword and, like, I don't know, trying to kill Circe. Like, it's actually not really clear.
Yeah, he doesn't have a plan. He's just, like, decided we're getting our men back.
Yeah. And, like, I feel like Hermes completely bails him out by giving him the perfect solution that he never would have been able to concoct on his own.
Yeah. He gives him the antidote, tells him even after that all the different ways that he could get tripped up. One being that, like,
he could get castrated.
Yeah, basically.
There's a lot of talk of castration in here.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get to it, I guess. But yeah, like, first he gets the antidote so that the potion doesn't work on him. The potion, which I think its intent is it implies that what it did to the men previously was made them forget home. So similar to like the Lotus Eater type of thing. Kind of makes them give up their will to strive, I think. And then she turns them into animals. But yeah, and then he will not, from the antidote, he will be prevented from being turned into an animal. And then Hermes tells him, then she's going to ask to sleep with you. And you'll say yes. But first, you will make sure she swears like an oath to no further harm him or his men or something like that. So that she won't castrate you when she gets you naked.
Yeah.
Because that's like, I guess always her plan B.
Yeah.
Like plan A is drug them, turn them into animals. But if that doesn't work, plan B is get them naked and castrate them.
Yeah.
And so Odysseus he's got the whole thing covered.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I find interesting too is that in the narrative, we are not given any reason for why Circe is doing this.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, mythology about Circe existed at the time, so readers would have known more probably than I even do. And nowadays, right, like Madeline Miller's book Circe, has explored some of that and gives her much more motivation. And so it's hard not to sort of import all of that. But I do find it interesting that like what Homer gives us, there's kind of no motivation for it.
Nothing.
Even the Cyclops had a little bit of motivation because Odysseus kind of like insulted him. The Cyclops did not go in as sort of a hostile enemy initially. He was provoked by Odysseus. And obviously that's not to justify what he did, but like here Circe is just kind of like from the get-go, I'm, attacking these people essentially.
Yeah. I mean, now that you're saying it, it's actually making it make a little bit of sense to me because so while the Cyclops refused guest friendship in the form of gifts, that whole thing, there is like this other side of guest friendship, which is just that like when people show up at your door, you bring them in and you don't harm them.
And you exchange stories. Because that's Polyphemus's first question is like, who are you? Are you guys pirates? Like, what are you guys doing here?
Yeah. And so there's this so Circe, I think maybe represents like a different version of violating guest friendship potentially, where she takes them in. She's not interested in who they are. But
actually does give them a feast, right? Like it starts very welcoming. It's like, here's all this food.
Yeah. It reminds me, Circe gives me like Hansel and Gretel. That's kind of the vibe I get because like in the story of Hansel and Gretel, you don't get a reason why the witch lures them in and wants to eat them, right? Like it's just obvious. Like that's like the consuming feminine. I don't know. Like it's an archetype kind of.
Yeah.
And so when the men they get this like, they get like, there's food. This is great. Loving this. And then the hospitality turns on a dime. And what was hospitable is like no longer.
Right.
Which is also like if the stag is a man-turned stag that they eat, it has that same feeling of like, this is a good thing, right? And then it turns.
Right.
And you're like, oh, this is actually a gross thing. So Circe being a different perversion of guest friendship is, I guess, a way to read it.
Yeah, yeah. But I do find it really interesting. So maybe it's not as big brain as I think it is, but right. So Odysseus has the antidote. He like does all the things Hermes tells him, and Circe's like impressed by him, and they do go sleep together. And then she eventually agrees to turn the men back into humans. And it's like, yay, victory. But then there's this interesting thing that hasn't happened before where she invites them to stay, and Odysseus and the rest of his men agree. Right? Like every other time they've had these little problems, they've either lost a bunch of people and bailed before they lose more, or they've like lost. Yeah, they've been sort of like getting out of there as quickly as they possibly can. Yeah. But in this case, there's not. There's like we have solved the puzzle. We have bested the enemy, the monster, the puzzle, whatever it is. But now that things are sort of made right, we're actually going to stay here. And I think that's an interesting change that's worth exploring why it happens.
They stay for a year.
Yeah.
And they have a glorious feast every night.
Yeah.
Right? And so you could make the argument that like, yeah, they have solved the puzzle. In some ways, they have found a little mini paradise, Lotus Eater style. Once they've turned the place, the Bay of Pigs, into sorry, but like once they've turned this terrible place, this place where they are pigs, they turn it into a paradise for themselves, and they are then like, wait, why would we ever leave? And so they, in some ways, they trap themselves there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that ties into my big brain theory of like when Circe transforms them back into humans, did she or did they remain sort of animals? Because they seem to be still enslaved to their appetites, right? Like they just want to eat and sleep together. Well, Odysseus wants to sleep with Circe and everybody wants to just like feast.
We don't know what the other guys are doing
all the time. But yeah, like they seem to live a very kind of base, debaucherous, revelrous, prodigal life that to me seems very still animalistic of just sort of like doing whatever your instincts tell you to do.
Yeah. So when it's interesting when Circe, majestic Lady Circe, when she gives the pigs an antidote to turn them back into men, the potion had made thick hog hairs sprout out on their bodies. Those bristles all flew off and they were men, but younger than before and much more handsome and taller. Then they recognized me. Each embraced me tightly. To your theory, yeah, they are the men that they were before, except they're younger and they're more handsome and they're taller. So are they the same men they were before? You know?
And we've seen Odysseus also be transformed, right? Like after he approached Nausicaa and then sort of bathed, it was very clear that Athena sort of like made him look even handsomer than he was. And so there is a lot of this language of sort of appearances changing. And that, right, makes us wonder, well, what is the sort of like true self? Because again, Odysseus is polytropos. He is the sort of man of many ways, many turns, many faces, all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, and this is, again, why I brought up Elpenor earlier, because this all kind of clicked for me when I read that description of him as, at least, again, Pope's is a little bit more loose, but not much for sense, nor much for courage famed, the youngest one of our band, a vulgar soul, born to banquet and to drain the bowl.
Yeah.
And again, that idea isn't directly present in the Greek, but it is present in the kind of themes of what's been happening of like they have just been partying the whole time.
Yeah.
And Elpenor just gets drunk and falls off a roof, like in a very slovenly, I think, animalistic way of like, they're clearly not really elevating themselves or thinking about home or all of these other things.
Elpenor seems to be like the individual who is exemplary of the way that they've all been living. Like he's the most extreme. He's partied the hardest.
Right.
And his death, his accidental falling off the roof, breaking his neck, comes on the morning that they have finally decided that they should leave.
Right. I do think it's important that despite all of, I think, my criticism of the crew here for staying and kind of just partying, they're not fully lost, because it is actually the crew who's able to break Odysseus out of the patterns and convince him to want to go home. That like they stay a year and then eventually the crew urge their chief, "Is this Ulysses our inglorious lot? And is the name of Ithaca forgot? Shall never the dear land in prospect rise, or the loved palace glitter in our eyes?" This idea that like some of the crew does still remember home, and they're like, wait, are we just going to do this forever? Is this our lot in life now, is to just like party here for the rest of our lives? There's a few people who recognize that like, no, there's something better on the horizon, this return home. And they're able to sort of like shake Odysseus out of the like stupor of revelry. Yeah.
So the men are like, maybe we should go home. They tell Odysseus that idea. And my translation says, my warrior soul agreed. So Odysseus is like, oh yeah, I am not a partier. I should go home. And so he goes to Circe and is like, I'd like to go home now. And I find it so, the interaction they have to be so interesting, because she tells him like, okay, you want to go home? You have to go to the underworld and talk to this guy, this blind prophet who's dead. Like that is such a, like she doesn't, again, like this book has very little reasoning behind it, right? We don't get any reasoning why Circe does what she does, but we also don't get much reasoning why they have to go to the underworld. It seems to be part of this, like, because they have had so much trouble getting home, they're kind of getting this idea that they are cursed by the gods. Like they're just not, they don't have like what it takes in terms of the gods being on their side to make it there. So the genius solution, Circe's solution, is for them to go to the underworld and get some advice from a real prophet. Odysseus kind of, we've talked about rebirth imagery a lot, but this whole like sail to the afterlife thing.
Embark on a catabasis.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's also so cool because within the story of the Odyssey, any snippet of the Odyssey could be a full-blown story in and of itself, right? Like it has all the things. Like he interacts with so many different things. And the next book we'll get to is just one snippet, which is go to the underworld and journey to the underworld and back, which in a lot of stories is just...
It's the whole thing.
That can be just a whole story in and of itself.
R.F. Kuang just wrote a like 800-page novel about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Dante wrote 100. No, like...
Yeah. Like, it's the stuff that, like, you can write one whole story about, but it's just a part in this whole thing. I honestly, while reading the conversation at the end of this book, I was like, wait, why do they have to go to the underworld? Like, why is this so imperative that they get Tiresias, the blind prophet? Why do they have to talk to him specifically? And like, what does them going to the underworld really symbolize? Because these men are also something I noticed about this book was they're all crying all the time. And anytime Odysseus is like pushing them to do something, they like literally cry. They don't want to do it. They're like, when he's like, we're going to go get our men back from Circe once they turn into pigs. And everybody just starts crying. He's like literally forcing these weeping men to do things. So now it's kind of this like rock bottom moment. Like they hit rock bottom and they partied for a little bit. And now they have to really they have to literally like go hit rock bottom kind of and like really sit in that before they can move on or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even further, like Circe's instructions aren't just go to the underworld, because Odysseus is like, well, how do I get there? Like it's like a page and a half of instructions, not just of like how to get there, but like what to do. There's this like really elaborate ritual they have to perform.
It's mostly a very elaborate ritual.
Yeah. And so it's like very, very detailed.
Yeah.
Which is another strange thing, where it's not simply telling him the next end goal on your journey, but it's actually like, it almost feels like you idiot have failed so many times at getting to your next step. Now I have to like babysit you and tell you literally step by step what you need to do to keep going.
Yeah.
We do know that this upcoming sequence will be in Christopher Nolan's Odyssey. Like there have been clips in the trailer that has been released that seem pretty clearly to be Underworld and shades coming up, right? Like we actually don't know. Circe might get cut entirely. There's no evidence in the trailer so far that Circe is included or any of this, but we do know that the trip to the Underworld will be a part of Matt Damon's journey.
Yeah.
Rather than keep talking about what is to come, we should end and let you get reading so that you can also find out what is to come. So I have an audiobook of Samuel Butler's translation of Book 11 if you would like to listen along, or you can read in whatever translation you have access to, or simply tune in next week and we'll summarize and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Until then.
Happy reading.